So in this video, we're going to take a look at some of the more developer-centric features of API Fortress. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is the notion or the ability to actually code directly within the platform. So we all know about the Visual Composer here, but what some people might not have noticed is this little code button here. If we toggle over to that, we can actually see the XML test scripting language, or the XML-derived test scripting language that lives underneath the graphic user interface in API Fortress. So by making changes here, we can affect changes to the test itself. But what a lot of people might not realize is that we can actually export this to the IDE of our choice. So in order to do so, we jump back to the test list, and then we can select either one or multiple tests, and then click Export Selected Tests. And that'll create a zip file, which we download, and then by opening that file up, we can actually access those files and edit them in our IDE, which we'll look at in just a moment. So now we're going to take a look at the kind of where the editing in an IDE meets the actual platform itself and how that workflow kind of works out. What we're looking at here is an API Fortress test, and the thing that I really want to draw attention to is this payload response status code should be equal to, or must be equal to, 556, which is a nonsense status code, but we want to remember it just for the sake of this demo. So this 556, right? If we swing over to my IDE, which is right here, we can see that value defined here as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change this value. I'm going to make it a 200 because that's what this test actually, not a 2000, a 200 because that's what this test actually calls for. I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to commit this to Git. So now we see the normal kind of Git and GitHub responses here in the command line. But what we also see here are these API Fortress messages. And that's because we're leveraging a post-receive script that we provide with our command line tooling. And what we're going to see if we jump back over to API Fortress is if we back out of this test and then jump back into it and allow it to repopulate, the status code of this test matches the change that we just made in Git. So what's happening here is we've tied our work in the IDE in with the platform. So that allows me as a developer to write my test code alongside the code for the API that I'm actually writing, and then loop that or allow my testers to have access to updated tests when they're actually testing that code after the commits are made. The last thing we're going to take a look at in this video is the command line tooling that API Fortress provides. So we're in just the basic terminal instance in my Mac environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invoke some commands that allow me to execute API Fortress tests remotely. So the tool is built in Python, so we're going to have to use Python to do it. So what I'm doing here is I'm invoking the APIF run program. I am running all of the tests in the project. I am grabbing the webhook and credentials from a configuration file that comes with the tool, which is going to grab my username, my password, and the webhook that I'm attempting to hit, referencing it with this key here. I'm running it in sync mode, and I'm getting the data back in format JUnit. So let's go ahead and do that. If we just give this a second, it's going to actually issue the request to the API Fortress API, parse the data as it comes back, and then print it for us. This is super useful for integrating with things like Jenkins, Bamboo, really any CI platform, or any place that you want to post actual test results from API Fortress without having to dive into the platform itself. You can invoke this from any terminal space, so this is super versatile, again, with regards to CI platforms and things like that. The other side of the command line tooling, rather, is here. Let's actually take a look at the help. Is APIF push, and this actually allows us to kind of push test files that we've written on our platform, or on our computer rather, in an IDE up to the platform if we don't necessarily want to use the Git integration. We're able to assign a specific branch to a file. We're able to recursively dive through kind of structured folders to find test files out of there. It's pretty versatile. Documentation is up on GitHub. The link will come along with this video.